whole approach to looking at rehabilitation and back into the community has to come with some hope. And that's the one thing I want people to feel that they have aphasia, is that you do have hope. You should have hope. You might have a slightly different life, but it's not to say that you can't continue and you don't have a part to play in society.
3 years ago, Emma Rich had a severe bleed on the brain, and in hospital she was classed as brain dead. Now, Emma is the charity coordinator for Say Aphasia. We talked to her about her recovery and getting back to work. Hi, and welcome everybody, and we hope you enjoy this podcast called On the Tip of My Tongue. Now, I'm Rob Edwards.
And I'm Jonathan Hirons.
And this podcast is a follow-up to a film which Jonathan made about aphasia. So, what is aphasia? Well, it's a condition caused by some kind of injury to the brain, which is often, could be a stroke, or could be just falling off a bike. And it affects your ability to use language in all its forms. Speaking, writing, reading, sending texts, whatever. 350,000 people in the UK suffer from a debilitating condition called aphasia. Fewer than half this number suffer from Parkinson's, and yet most people have heard of Parkinson's, whilst almost nobody has heard of aphasia.
Let me introduce you to a friend of the show who's got a fantastic podcast.
Hi, I'm Talia Lazarus, and in 2021 I was relearning how to walk, and in 22 I was learning how to run 21 kilometres. So join me on I Got Back Up as I share powerful life stories. Unexpected challenges and moments can defeat us, but the human spirit possesses an immense strength that allows us to rise above the darkest moments, rebuilding our lives in extraordinary ways.
You can listen to Talia's podcast on all the usual channels.
So hi, I'm Emma. I'm Emma Rich. I'm the charity coordinator at Say Aphasia.
Welcome, Emma. It's great to have you with me. Perhaps you can start by let everybody know what happened to you and your aphasia.
About this time of year, 3 years ago, I had a severe bleed on the brain. I passed out at the top of the stairs in my house. I was going through a really stressful time at work, a number of different contributing factors, and it resulted in 2 brain hemorrhages, severe. I had a midline shift, and I was lucky that my husband was in the house, called the ambulance, came within 5 minutes. I lived down the road from the hospital, another lucky factor. But by the time I reached the hospital, I had a Glasgow coma score of 3 with fixed dilated pupils. And so basically I was classed as brain dead. The neurosurgeon gave me mantaloid therapy, which he said is the last resort for brain injury patients, to see if the eyes would flicker. And so the eyes would be reactive. So my eyes did react to it, and I underwent an emergency craniotomy to get rid of the bleed on the brain. I was in a coma for I think roughly 2 weeks, and I also lost the sight in one eye from the bleed on the brain, and I actually got the sight back in my eye a year later. They operated, and that felt like an absolute miracle, but I got my sight back. After I came out of a coma, I remember popping out of bed thinking, I can't do this to my kids. I need to be at home. I've never been away from them for more than one night. It was the lockdown, COVID, the hospital was in lockdown, so there was no visitors. It's coming up to Christmas. I really wanted to be home, but there was a long waiting list to go to the rehabilitation hospital at Hayward Heath, and I would have been in hospital for 9 months if I'd stayed in hospital, but my husband and brother fought to get me out. So I came home just before Christmas, and the community NHS team came out to me every day. But that was the start of my recovery, just being able to sleep and rest. I think in hospital, it's impossible to get any rest. I wasn't allowed the home around me. There's people people in the next bed hallucinating, no peace and quiet. So when I got home, I just felt like I could sleep. That's what I needed the most. When you're in hospital, they try doing tests on you to see the extent of your brain injury. You're not at that stage ready to do any tests. I think I was very rude to the nursing staff about doing those tests. I came home, and on the condition that I would accept a place at a neuro rehab centre. So the NHS managed to get funding from the council for me to go to a neurological rehab centre run by the Disabilities Trust. And that was in just outside Horsham. I had Christmas at home, and then I went to a neuro rehab centre. That was a bit of a gift. I don't know whether this is a sign of how stressed I was at the time, because I was in beautiful Sussex countryside and had access to doing art therapy, singing. Neuroplasticity was a large part of therapy, and I think actually that was a bit of a gift, being able to do neuroplasticity, because you understand more about your brain injury, rewiring the brain. Speech therapy, because I had to learn to walk, talk, all of those things again. My memory loss permanent. It's improved a lot more than it was, but I think the neuroplasticity really did make a massive difference. I painted prolifically, and I've never painted before in my life, and just having that opportunity to paint was just something I never thought I'd enjoy so much as I did. I spent hours painting, and then being able to walk in the countryside, I don't think the staff expected. They'd say, "Oh, yes, your assistant will take you for a walk. That'll be 50 metres around the building." It was like, no, I want to do a proper walk. So they had to get a bungalow, my own bungalow on site, and right therapy that I needed, the fresh air. I know the staff had concerns about going out and about and being safe and being able to find things. Not many brain injury patients, they said, could ever find the car or all be able to go out by themselves, and they used to see me stumbling back by myself. But yes, I actually look back at that time and think it was really quite an enjoyable experience. I don't think many people ever say that about a neurological rehabilitation centre, but just having that time to do those lovely activities and the fresh air was inspiring, and it gave me the rest that I needed.
That's an incredible story, I have to say. Was it locked down when you were in your bungalow?
So they had strict COVID testing, and for your family to come, they had to provide evidence they'd done the test. But because I was in the bungalow and they didn't have to go into the neuro rehab centre, they could come as long as they tested. But I did because that was one of the conditions for me. It was really important to see my children, to have a husband, and have some normality. I think sometimes people can feel quite institutionalised.
Yeah.
And just sit there and let themselves go. I think there's a bit of a myth that neurological rehab centres, people think it's end of life care. And just to have hope. And so having normality was a really important, and my family were a really important part to my recovery. I met some of the staff were fantastic, as well as the NHS I met along the way. I owe them so much. Just really inspiring. And yeah, the care was excellent. I just wish that people could have the same access to neuro rehab, because I think access to rehabilitation varies depending on where you live.
Well, I was going to say, it's a bit of a lottery, isn't it?
Yes, and then I find out. So when I go to different drop-in groups through Say Aphasia, I find out that some people have had no access to speech therapy. Some people have access to a couple of sessions. Lots of people have to pay when they don't have. It's financial struggle anyway, and then they have to pay for themselves to go to speech therapy. So I find I've been really lucky with the access to therapy I've had, and the fact that I've had immediate access, I do think has helped with my speech. I still have some problems. I think the extent of the brain injury I had, it would be impossible not to have any side effects. But I do count myself lucky. When I left the Neuro Rehab centre, I came home and I started, my speech therapist mentioned the drop-in group in home. And that became a lifeline of getting back to some normality, because there's a gap in time when you're just left to get on with things, and the isolation that you feel as part of that. It's hard enough trying to get to it. It takes all your might trying to get to the drop-in group, but that in itself helps with your rehabilitation, makes you more mobile, you go to the group. But when you get there, everybody has dysphasia, and you can relax because you don't have to explain to people about your situation, why you can't find the words. And at those groups, you'll find there is a lot of communication that takes place, in a variety of different ways. There's a lot of warmth and a lot of humour. So you find it's like having a family. In a time of need, when you need people, when you find that you're losing friends because people don't understand what you've been through, there is a lot of myths about brain injuries that people get scared of. They get scared of talking to you. I think people think brain injuries, they automatically think split personalities. They think that you're going to have bad temper, get frustrated when you can't find the words. They finish everything for you. And so at the group, it's just like a safe haven where you can go and you can try and talk as much as you want. You don't have to be there at the start or finish. No one remembers anyone's name. And so that's the lovely thing, is that there isn't the embarrassment that comes with it. And that saw me through a period of time when I was out of work, I lost my job, and I felt increasingly isolated, and that became a lifeline to me.
The group you're talking about is presumably was Colin's group. Was that
Yes,
Say Aphasia?
on home.
Yeah. So you got more involved with the running of the group. Is that right? How does that work?
My NHS speech therapist who introduced me to the group, she recommended that I do some befriending work in the community. So I used to go to people that had strokes in the local community that couldn't get out of the house. So a lifeline for them. I'd help them with the shopping. I'd just go for a conversation with them. It became like a lifeline for them. And I used to go to the home group just socially. I was back at work. I was looking to reduce my hours and get rid of commuting to London. As you know, neurofatigue remains a problem. And so it was just exhausting travelling to London. And so I saw the job for Say Aphasia come up with 10 minutes away from the closing day. It has all the HR skills and safeguarding skills that I knew I had, and I thought that would be a dream come true. All the skills that I could offer for an organised charity that I really passionately believe in, and giving people the same access to these groups throughout the country. So we're trying to grow the groups so people can have that support in their local community. And so it's all run by peer leaders. All the groups are run by peer leaders that have dysphasia. And that's what makes it unique. It's not run by, we have connections with the NHS speech therapists. You're referring to the group. The group is led by a peer leader that has dysphasia. The volunteers have dysphasia. Some of the volunteers don't, but that's what makes the difference. That people feel wholly supported, that people are all in the same situation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they can get support.
Yeah. Yes, it's quite important, isn't it? And obviously Colin's worked that out, hasn't he? He's worked out, when I'm talking to Colin about this, he obviously realises that if you've got people with aphasia as well, it's not somebody with a charity running something. Like quite often it is, isn't it?
Sometimes you feel that when you go
kind of one
you feel that there's like either medical intervention where
Yes.
people are trying to
Yeah,
correct your speech.
Yeah.
And so what we do at the drop-in groups is not speech language therapy in the fact we're correcting people.
No.
It's just an informal drop-in where people can build their communication skills in small groups over a coffee and cake. So it's not medical intervention, and it's by people that understand firsthand. So it's not someone thinking, if I was in your shoes, I would understand. It's someone that no one understands anyone better than someone that's been through
Yeah, exactly.
the same situation.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So do you travel to the other groups?
I
Part
do.
of your job?
Yes, I do. So at the moment, I've only been doing the post since October. So yes, I've been to all the groups in Sussex, and I'm also looking to get more volunteers into those groups. If anyone wants to volunteer, they can get in touch. But I'm also looking at going to all the other groups, and we've got other groups throughout the country. And we're looking at starting new groups and building those connections with the speech therapists who don't have a lot of time on their hands. Time is precious. And so saying to them, look, we have these groups and this can provide an excellent pathway to your service users in the community. Please refer them on, come along to the group, the first session with them, and introduce them to the group.
Right.
So then they've got that pathway of knowing that they're supported rather than just having one session, two sessions, and then they're just left by themselves to get along with it.
Yeah, that's kind of happened to me. I had 6 sessions, and that was that. I have no problem. The speech therapists themselves were brilliant, but they had sort of signed me off.
Oh, do you know?
I did ask for some more. I did get some more about a year later. I actually requested some, but they're under pressure themselves, aren't they? I know this.
And then aphasia is complex as well because so it affects people's writing, reading, and speech in different ways. And so when you're talking, having that speech therapy session start with it, no one's looking at your writing, are they? Or saying, how can we help with that? It's very immediate. And so you're left to kind of address all those problems that you're left with yourself.
Fortunately, my wife was a great help on that front. She understood what was going on quite quickly, or very quickly. So she carried on. But quite shocking, talking the other day about the fact that some people have no speech therapy at all.
Do you know, I'm finding out more and more from going to these meeting people at the drop-ins that actually it's very common that people don't have access to any speech therapists.
I would have thought that's, almost, that would be something, the first thing that anybody would look at.
It seems absolutely crazy to me. And then there's complete different access to services depending on whether you had a brain injury or whether you had a stroke.
Yeah.
And I think because I was acute, I had an acute brain injury, I had access. If it wasn't so acute, I wouldn't have had access to any services.
This is interesting because, I had a bleed on my brain, but it stopped quite quickly. So I don't know where I fell in your assessment of whether I wasn't acute, obviously, because I was in the hospital and then I came out again quite quickly. But I don't know whether that helped me getting the speech therapy or whether it was just luck that I happened to be in the area that they had speech therapists who were available. I don't know.
And
I don't know how it works.
It's proven that having access to speech therapy as soon as possible
3 months
makes
minimum.
a large amount of difference.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very sad that the funding for speech therapists isn't quite there.
No.
Because speech therapists are excellent. I can tell by talking to them, though they are well off their feet.
Of course, they have other things. Obviously, as I understand, it's about 40% of speech therapists work with children.
It seems like the funding is predominantly there for working with children or stammers.
And stammerers, that's right. Yes, the other one.
But actually, it's trying to understand why that isn't there for brain injury patients or strokes when you think, well, actually, a lot of strokes are happening younger and younger. And these people are left with actually a situation when, as the hospital told me when I was there, actually brain injury patients never work again.
No.
And then you're left just to deal with that.
Yeah.
And what that means.
At whatever age you are, yeah.
When actually, surely funding for it, when the government talk about disabled people working, that surely has to be part of it.
You're listening to On the Tip of My Tongue, a podcast dedicated to raising awareness about aphasia. If you're enjoying the podcast and finding it helpful, please subscribe to it by clicking on the Support the Show link in the description. Thank you.
Well, let's move on to that, because obviously your background is HR. One of the things that you just picked on that, I know a number of people who've had strokes at very early 20s and 30s. And obviously they don't go spend the rest of their lives not being fulfilled. So I think the thing maybe needs to happen is that somebody, probably the government, needs to understand that there are people out there in a working age that could go back to work, but they're not allowed. And so for whatever reason, it doesn't seem to fit with them. What's your view on that?
I personally think that there is a need for supported employment, and so the government should invest in supported employment services where disabled people can actually get support in looking for employment, and that they can help educate employers. You have lots of employers that say they want inclusive these days, but understanding what that means is something else in practice.
Yeah.
But to think that brain injury patients and stroke patients don't have a part to play in society or can't contribute towards in the workplace is ridiculous. And if you see the levels of brain injury patients that never work again, that to me is very upsetting. But I think the people that have had strokes or brain injury, it's realising that the most important thing is having hope and realising that actually you are allowed adjustments in the workplace. And that's part of every workplace every employee should be able to get an occupational health referral with the adjustments they need for their job. And that hopefully could see them back at work. And whereas that's not possible, they could either take ill health retirement. And I think a lot of people don't feel able to have that conversation. But to know that ill health retirement is there for people and that could financially help is important. Where they can't go back to work to their old job is also knowing that they have the right to reasonable alternatives, suitable alternatives for other roles that the organisation might have. And I think it's important that people know these things are available to them rather than thinking, I can't go back to work.
So where do you think the blockage is then? Because you quite rightly pointed out all the things that are available, but how do people get to know?
I think education's a really important part of it, because so you can see these days neurodiversity is all the rage.
Yeah.
But it's understanding what we mean by neurodiversity,
Well, exactly,
and that includes brain injuries and strokes. With all these workplaces talking about inclusion, embracing the whole range of neurodiversity, they need to understand what that means.
Yeah.
And that also covers brain injury and strokes. And I think education in the workplace is one of the most important things. People are scared of brain injuries.
Right.
I do honestly believe people are scared of it. There's lots of misinformation. People worry about people having seizures and they think it makes them unsuitable to work. It doesn't. most people that have epilepsy take medication for it. Makes them quite safe to work. But I do think there's a lot of education about stroke and brain injury patients that's not really out there.
You mean for employers?
Employers, yeah. Maybe that's because it's the age range of the people that have them. But I do think there is a need on education.
Who does the educating?
Well, we have access to work. The service doesn't particularly work quite well because a lot of the time it just means that to access the service, it would take 3 to 6 months. So that's not really, lots of people have lost a job by then. So it is broken a little bit, the system, but there is support available. The citizens' advice offers some great help as well.
But there's fewer and fewer of those, aren't there?
Yes. And so I do think there is a need for supported employment for stroke and brain injury patients.
Right. Yes.
And some kind of form of advocacy is important. And the government have to look about the statistics, don't they? And think, well, actually, if they want the same people to return to work, which they say they do, they need to look at the statistics and say, why are brain injury patients not returning to work? And I don't think that's because they can't.
They can't, yeah. No, exactly.
And with dysphasia, simple things can be put in place. Like I remember going through a really embarrassing situation at work when, so for names, for me, similar names are difficult. So I mailed the wrong person with a very similar name, and then had the embarrassment of it going the whole of the FLT going data protection. When you think, well, actually, it's not a data protection issue. No. I can quite easily mail them and tell them to delete the message. But just a simple understanding, it's about having that open conversation with the employee and asking them what they need. It's not for the employer to come up with all suggestions. The person would know best about what they need.
Yeah, what I can do, what I can't do. Yeah.
So I think it's really encouraging employers to have those open conversations with that person about what support they would like and what support they need.
What about, say, example, the Federation for Small Businesses as just a group of people who look after employers? Why couldn't somebody like that have a course or access for something like so that people with small, I'm thinking big businesses, I think are a difficult problem, but I think smaller businesses, and I mean people with up to, I don't know, 250 people.
People worry about the cost, don't they, to their organisation, of having to say people working for them. But I do think education is key because the cost of making adjustments, that's why it's called reasonable adjustments, it shouldn't always be a cost to the employee. There is help, access to work that the government pay for those adjustments. But I do think it is about reasonable adjustments. And when you look about reasonable adjustments for somebody with dysphasia, it's not necessarily talking costly adjustments. It's about giving someone time. It's about awareness for others, realising you don't have to talk for somebody. They might just need time and awareness, just some kind of general awareness of how it affects the individual. I don't think it necessarily means cost, which people get scared of. And I think they need to think of the benefits of being inclusive. And our society as a whole, what are we saying about if people are ill, they no longer can function in our society? That's part of living in a caring society, isn't it? Everyone has health and ill health. It's part of life.
Yeah. And people who with a different sort of ill health will carry on working, won't they? With heart problems or all sorts of things that you can carry on working with.
Yeah.
But aphasia seems to be the one you can't. One of the brain injury, shall we say, to be more precise, seems to be one of the things that is cut off from that sort of level of. I don't know. I don't know there are what the numbers are about people sort of working age and not working age with the problem. but that would be interesting to find out what that is.
Yes, I think it is very interesting. I think it's very high. But aphasia is one of those things that doesn't affect people's intelligence. The general population think if you have speech problems or writing problems, that equates to do with your intelligence, your cognitive ability. And that's wrong.
Well, we know this, don't we?
Yes.
But, and I mean, you've got a job. Colin's functioning very well with his charity. We know it can be done. Do we not? You know.
Yes. It's just getting that awareness out there, so giving people more chances.
Sounds like it's a long road.
Yes, it is a long road, and that's one of the frustrations of going through this. It seems like more support should be made available. Well, and that's not talking about the NHS or what it means about really talking in terms of
society. You're talking,
and society's expectations.
You can't put it all on the NHS.
No, I don't actually. I'm
poor old NHS.
Pleased with the NHS, the support I've had, because the one thing the NHS is has the medical understanding of it. I've had fantastic support from them. It's really about general society and the lack of understanding and awareness.
Yeah, which is what we're trying to do between us.
Yes, let's hope so.
Well, because I've talked to you and I've talked to a couple of other people recently, I'm thinking that this podcast may take a bit of a turn and go towards what we've been talking about, is as to how we get people to understand that there are some people out there that can perfectly fit into the working life.
I think just giving people brain injury and strokes hope, empowering.
Yeah.
Because their risks are off quite a lot. And hope is so powerful. I just remember in the rehab unit how the guy in the bungalow next door to me, he had a stroke. And just as he was leaving, I was telling him that they told me that I was on the middle step. And I was thinking of Kermit the Frog. And he told me they told him he was on the bottom step.
Oh, God.
And that's how he'd been through rehabilitation. He was leaving to go back to work. And you think, is that inspiring for somebody that has to continue with their life? So I think the whole approach to looking at rehabilitation and back into community has to come with some hope. And that's the one thing I want people to feel that they have aphasia, is that you do have hope. You should have hope. You know, you might have a slightly different life, but it's not to say that you can't continue and you don't have a part to play in society.
Well, that's great. We'll put that on your promotional bit.
Thank you.
Because I think that's the sort of thing we need to push out, as is also from somebody who's had all the problems as well, not somebody who's just in the subject or whatever it might be.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing that you're doing, because it's helping people with aphasia, looking at examples of other people, and that is lovely for them, but it's also educating the wider population.
Yeah, that's the plan. But it's it's hard going. I have to be honest with you, to keep things ticking over as well.
It's the hardest thing. It's opening up access.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which I'm doing slowly.
No, I think you're doing an amazing job.
Well,
it's really inspiring, honestly.
Thank you. Well, I hope it inspires other people as well. Right. Well, thank you very much,
Emma.
Thank you
for listening.
It's fantastic to hear what your story and also your views on what we could do better. So, thank you very much, and I hope all goes well in the new year.
Take care.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thank you for listening to this On the Tip of My Tongue podcast. We hope you found it helpful and informative. Now, if you want more help and information about strokes and aphasia, please go to stroke.org.uk, Say Aphasia, that's SAY aphasia, all one word, .org, or the aphasia page of nhs.uk. You're listening to On the Tip of My Tongue, a podcast dedicated to raising awareness about aphasia. If you're enjoying the podcast and finding it helpful, please subscribe to it by clicking on the Support the Show link in the description. Thank you. This has been a Buffalo Lounge production. Please follow Buffalo Lounge on all the socials.